On September 29, 2012, Harold and Toni Henthorn drove through the gates of Rocky Mountain National Park. They chose a Saturday afternoon to celebrate 12 years of marriage. Toni Henthorn was a highly respected eye surgeon from Jackson, Mississippi. She had moved to Colorado to start a life with Harold, a man who told everyone he was a successful fundraiser for charities. Most couples visiting the park stick to the popular spots. They walk the flat loop around Bear Lake, or take photos near the visitor center. Harold had a different plan for this specific afternoon. He led Toni toward the Deer Mountain Trail. This path is more demanding, winding through steep terrain and dense forest. They eventually hiked more than a mile off the main trail to a remote rocky ledge. Around 6 p.m., the quiet of the mountain was broken. Harold called 911. He told the dispatcher that Toni had fallen from a cliff while they were taking a photograph. She had dropped nearly 130 feet onto a bed of jagged rocks. Harold claimed he scrambled down to her and was desperately trying to perform CPR. When the first responders arrived, the story Harold told began to fall apart. The scene didn't look like a tragic accident. It looked like a staged event. Today, we are looking at the evidence that exposed Harold Henthorn as a man who didn't just witness his wife's death, but spent months planning it.
Hello, my name is Harold Henthorn. I'm in the Rocky Mountain National Park.
Okay.
I need an alpine mountain rescue team immediately.
The emergency call lasted for over an hour as Harold waited for rangers to reach his location. During that time, he received step-by-step instructions on how to save Toni's life. He told the dispatcher he was exhausted from the effort of chest compressions. However, when a park ranger finally reached the ledge, they noticed something strange about the victim. Toni's body showed the massive trauma of a long fall, but her face told a different story. Her lipstick was perfectly applied. Her makeup had not been smeared. In a real life-saving situation, the physical contact required for CPR is intense. It almost always leaves marks, bruises, or at the least messes up the person's appearance. The ranger also noticed Harold's behavior. He seemed more focused on his phone than on his wife. Investigators later checked his records and saw that while he was supposedly fighting to save Toni, he was sending dozens of text messages. He was updating his friends and his brother-in-law, Barry Bertolet, on the situation. Harold told the rangers that Toni was looking at her phone when she tripped. He said she received a text message about their daughter's soccer game, looked down for a split second, and tumbled over the edge. But when the FBI examined Toni's phone, they found no such message. No one had texted her about a soccer game that afternoon. A few days after the fall, investigators searched Harold's Jeep. In the glove box, they found a hiking map of Rocky Mountain National Park. This wasn't a clean, new map. It was covered in handwritten notes. In the middle of a remote section of the Deer Mountain Trail, there was a small X drawn in pink highlighter. The X sat exactly where Toni had fallen. When the FBI asked Harold about the mark, he gave several different explanations. First, he claimed he didn't know how it got there. Then, he suggested he might have been marking a spot where he saw a nice tree. Eventually, he stopped answering questions about the map altogether. The investigation then moved to Harold's cell phone tower data. Harold had told everyone that the anniversary hike was a last-minute decision. He said they only went to Deer Mountain because the other trails were too crowded. The digital evidence proved otherwise. In the 6 weeks before Toni died, Harold had visited Rocky Mountain National Park 9 separate times. He didn't just visit the park, he went to the exact same area on Deer Mountain. He was scouting the terrain. He was looking for a spot that was high enough to be lethal, but remote enough to ensure there were no witnesses. One witness did come forward later. A hiker recalled seeing a man matching Harold's description standing alone on that ledge a week before the murder. The man wasn't hiking or enjoying the view. He was just standing there, looking over the edge, as if he were measuring the drop. As the FBI looked deeper into Harold's background, they realized that the man Toni had married was a total fiction. Harold told his wife and her family that he was a high-level consultant for nonprofits. He claimed his work took him all over the country. He left the house every morning in a suit, carrying a briefcase. In reality, Harold Henthorn hadn't held a job in over 10 years. He didn't have an office. He didn't have any clients. He spent his workdays sitting in local libraries or walking around shopping malls. He was living entirely off Toni's salary as a surgeon. He managed to keep this secret for a decade. He even fabricated tax documents to show Toni that he was contributing to their bank accounts. But the money he was earning was actually just funds he was moving around from their savings. The motive for the murder was purely financial. Harold had taken out 3 separate life insurance policies on Toni, totaling $4.7 million. He had even forged her signature on some of the documents. He was facing a future where his lies were about to be exposed. Toni was starting to ask questions about their finances, and the life insurance was his only way to maintain his lifestyle without actually working. There was also a history of accidents that the family had previously ignored. A year before the fall, Harold and Toni were at their mountain cabin. Harold was working on the deck and called Toni to come help him. As she walked underneath, a heavy wooden beam fell and struck her in the neck. She survived, but she was nearly paralyzed. At the time, she told her mother she thought Harold had dropped it on purpose, but she quickly dismissed the thought as crazy. The FBI didn't think it was crazy. They saw it as a failed first attempt. The most chilling part of the investigation involved a case from 17 years earlier. In 1995, Harold was married to his first wife, Sandra Lynn. They were driving on a deserted road in Douglas County, Colorado, when Harold claimed they had a flat tire. Harold told the police that while he was jacking up the car, Sandra Lynn crawled under the vehicle to help him look for a loose lug nut. At that moment, the jack slipped. The car fell and crushed her. The local sheriff's office ruled it an accident at the time, but they reopened the case after Toni's death. They found the original photos of the car. There was a partial footprint on the fender of the Jeep, suggesting someone had kicked the car to knock it off the jack. Just like the anniversary hike with Toni, Harold was the only witness. He collected nearly $500,000 in insurance money after Sandra Lynn's death. He used that money to start his new life and eventually marry Toni. He followed a specific pattern. He waited until he was 12 years into the marriage, picked a remote location, and staged an accident that left him as the grieving widower with a massive payout. The trial began in 2015. The prosecution didn't have a video of the push, but they had a mountain of circumstantial evidence. They showed the jury the map with the X. They presented the cell tower data from his scouting trips. They brought in the medical experts who testified that Toni's injuries were inconsistent with the story Harold told. The defense tried to argue that Harold was simply a clumsy man who had the misfortune of losing 2 wives to accidents. They said he was a socially awkward person who didn't know how to react to trauma. The jury took less than a day to decide. They found Harold Henthorn guilty of first-degree murder. During the sentencing, the judge called Harold's actions cold-blooded and calculated. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The case of Toni Henthorn changed the way the National Park Service handles wilderness deaths. They now have specialized investigative units that look beyond the surface of a slip and fall. Toni's family eventually won a legal battle to prevent Harold from receiving any of her estate. They used the money to create a foundation in her name, supporting the education of young doctors. While Harold tried to turn his wife's life into a paycheck, her family ensured her legacy remained tied to the work she loved. Harold Henthorn remains in a federal prison in Indiana. He still maintains his innocence, but the map with the pink X remains the final word on what really happened that afternoon on Deer Mountain.